call to order. Not moving. Okay. Before proceeding to the general debate, the General Assembly will hear an introduction by the Secretary General of his annual report on the work of the organization, issued as document A/79/1 under agenda item 111 in accordance with resolution 51/241. I now give the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our world is in a whirlwind. We are in an era of epic transformation, facing challenges unlike any we have ever seen, challenges that demand global solutions. Yet, geopolitical divisions keep deepening. The planet keeps heating. Wars rage with no clue how they will end. And nuclear posturing and new weapons cast a dark shadow. We are edging towards the unimaginable, a power keg that risks engulfing the world. Meanwhile, 2024 is the year that half of humanity goes to the poles, and half of humanity will be affected. I stand before you in this whirlwind, convinced of two overriding truths. First, the state of our world is unsustainable. We can't go on like this. And second, the challenges we face are solvable. But that requires us to make sure the mechanisms of international problem solving actually solve problems. The Summit of the Future was a first step, but we have a long way to go. And getting there requires confronting three major drivers of unsustainability. A world of impunity, where violations and abuses threaten the very foundation of international law and UN Charter. A world of inequality, where injustices and grievances threaten to undermine countries or even push them over the edge. And a world of uncertainty, where unmanaged global risks threaten our future in unknowable ways. These worlds of impunity, inequality, and uncertainty are connected and colliding. Excellencies, the level of impunity in the world is politically indefensible and morally intolerable. Today, a growing number of governments and others feel entitled to get out of jail free card. They can trample international law. They can violate the United Nations Charter. They can turn a blind eye to international human rights conventions or the decisions of international courts. They can thumb their nose at international humanitarian law. They can invade another country, lay waste to whole societies, or utterly disregard the welfare of their own people. And nothing will happen. We see this age of impunity everywhere, in the Middle East, in the heart of Europe, in the Horn of Africa, and beyond. The war in Ukraine is spreading with no signs of letting up. Civilians are paying the price in rising death tolls and shattered lives and communities. It is time for a just peace based on the UN Charter, on international law, and on UN resolutions. Meanwhile, Gaza is a non-stop nightmare that threatens to take the entire region with it. Look no further than Lebanon. We should all be alarmed by the escalation. Lebanon is at the brink. The people of Lebanon, the people of Israel, and the people of the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza. Let's be clear. Nothing can justify the abhorrent acts of terror committed by Hamas on October 7th or the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. The speed and scale of the killing and destruction in Gaza are unlike anything in my years as Secretary General. More than 200 of our own staff have been killed, many with their families. And yet, the women and men of the United Nations continue to deliver humanitarian aid. And I know you join me in paying a special tribute to UNRWA and to all humanitarians in Gaza. The international community must mobilize for an immediate ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages, and the beginning of an irreversible process towards a two-state solution. For those who go on undermining that goal with more settlements, more land grabs, more incitement, I ask, what is the alternative? How could the world accept a one state in which a large number of Palestinians would be included without any freedom, any rights, or dignity? In Sudan, a brutal power struggle has unleashed horrific violence, including widespread rape and sexual assaults. A humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding as famine spreads. Yet outside powers continue to interfere with no unified approach to finding peace. In the Sahel, the dramatic and rapid expansion of the terrorist threat requires a joint approach rooted in solidarity, but regional and international cooperation have broken down. From Myanmar to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to Haiti, to Yemen and beyond, we continue to see appalling levels of violence and human suffering in the face of a chronic failure to find solutions. Meanwhile, our peacekeeping missions are too often operating in areas where simply there is no peace to keep. Instability in many places around the world is a byproduct of instability in power relations and geopolitical divides. For all its perils, the Cold War had rules. There were hotlines, red lines, and guardrails. It can feel as though we don't have that today, and nor do we have a unipolar world. We are moving to a multipolar world, but we are not yet there yet. We are in a purgatory of polarity. And in this purgatory, more and more countries are filling the spaces of geopolitical divides, doing whatever they want with no accountability. That is why it is more important than ever to reaffirm the Charter, to respect international law, to support and implement decisions of international courts, and to reinforce human rights in the world, anywhere and everywhere.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, rising inequalities are a second driver of unsustainability and a stain on our collective conscience. Inequality is not a technical or bureaucratic issue. At its heart, inequality is a question of power with historic roots. Conflict, climate upheaval, and the cost of living crisis are pushing those roots even deeper. At the same time, the world has not recovered from the surge in inequalities caused by the pandemic. Of the world's poorest 75 countries, 1/3 are worse off today than they were 5 years ago. During that same period, the 5 richest men in the world
Excellences, la discrimination et les abus généralisés fondés sur le genre constituent l'inégalité la plus répandue dans toutes les sociétés. Chaque jour, il semble que nous soyons confrontés à de nouveaux cas révoltants de féminicide, de violences fondées sur le genre et de viols collectifs en temps de paix comme en temps qu'arme de guerre. Dans certains pays, les lois sont utilisées pour menacer la santé et les droits reproductifs. Et en Afghanistan, les lois sont utilisées pour entériner l'oppression systématique des femmes et des filles. Et je suis désolé de constater que malgré des années de beaux discours, l'inégalité de genre se manifeste, et je vous demande pardon de le dire, elle se manifeste aujourd'hui encore pleinement dans cette enceinte. Moins de 10% des intervenants au débat général de cette semaine sont des femmes. C'est inacceptable, surtout quand on sait que l'égalité entre les hommes et les femmes contribue à la paix, au développement durable, à l'action climatique et bien plus encore. C'est précisément pour cela que nous avons pris des mesures spécifiques pour atteindre la parité homme-femme parmi les hauts responsables de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, objectif qui est déjà complété. C'est faisable. J'exhorte les institutions politiques et économiques du monde dominées par les hommes à le faire aussi. Excellences, les inégalités mondiales se reflètent et se renforcent jusque dans nos propres organisations internationales. Le Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies a été conçu par les vainqueurs de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. À l'époque, la majeure partie du continent africain était encore sous domination coloniale. À ce jour, l'Afrique n'a toujours aucun siège permanent au sein de la principale instance de paix du monde. Un changement s'impose. Et il en va de même pour l'architecture financière mondiale mise en place il y a 80 ans. Je félicite les dirigeants de la Banque mondiale et du Fonds monétaire international pour les mesures importantes qu'ils ont entreprises. Mais comme le souligne le Pacte pour l'avenir, la lutte contre les inégalités exige une accélération de la réforme de l'architecture financière internationale. Au cours des 8 dernières décennies, l'économie mondiale s'est développée et transformée, et les institutions de Bretton Woods n'ont pas suivi le rythme. Elles ne sont plus en mesure de fournir un filet de sécurité mondiale, ni d'offrir aux pays en développement le niveau de soutien dont ils ont tant besoin. Dans les pays les plus pauvres du monde, le coût des intérêts de la dette dépasse en moyenne le coût des investissements dans l'éducation, la santé et les infrastructures publiques réunies. Et à l'échelle du monde, plus de 80% des cibles des objectifs de développement durable ne sont pas en bonne voie. Excelências, volver al camino correcto requiere un aumento de financiamiento para la Agenda 2030 y el Acuerdo de París. Y eso implica que los países del G20 lideren un estímulo para los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible de 500.000 millones de dólares al año. Implica reformas para aumentar sustancialmente la capacidad de préstamo de los bancos multilaterales de desarrollo y permitirles ampliar masivamente la financiación asequible a largo plazo para el clima y el desarrollo. Implica ampliar la financiación de contingencia mediante el reciclaje de los derechos especiales de giro e implica promover una reestructuración de la deuda a largo plazo. Excelencias, no me hago ilusiones sobre las barreras a la reforma del sistema multilateral. Los que tienen poder político y económico o los que creen tenerlo son siempre reacios al cambio. Pero el statu quo ya está agotando su poder. Sin reformas, la fragmentación es inevitable y las instituciones globales perderán legitimidad, credibilidad y eficacia. Excellencies, the third driver of our unsustainable world is uncertainty. The ground is shifting under our feet. Anxiety levels are off the charts, and young people in particular are counting on us and seeking solutions. Uncertainty is compounded by two existential threats: the climate crisis and the rapid advance of technology, in particular artificial intelligence. Excellencies, we are in a climate meltdown. Extreme temperatures, raging fires, droughts, and epic floods are not natural disasters. They are human disasters, increasingly fueled by fossil fuels. No country is spared. But the poorest and most vulnerable are hardest hit. Climate hazards are blowing a hole through the budgets of many African countries, costing up to 5% of GDP every year. And this is just the start. We are on course to careen past the global limit of a 1.5 degree temperature rise. But as the problem gets worse, solutions are getting better. Renewable prices are plummeting, rollout is accelerating, and lives are being transformed by affordable, accessible, clean energy. Renewables don't just generate power, they generate jobs, wealth, energy security, and a path out of poverty for millions. But developing countries cannot be plundered in that journey. Our panel on critical minerals has recommended fair and sustainable ways to meet global demand for these resources, which are essential to the renewables revolution. Excellencies, a future without fossil fuel is certain. A fair and fast transition is not. That is in your hands. By next year, every country must produce an ambitious new national climate action plan or national determined contributions. And this must bring national energy strategies, sustainable development priorities, and climate ambitions together. They must align with 1.5 degree limit, cover the whole economy, and contribute to every one of the COP28 energy transition targets. An International Energy Agency report released today breaks this down. By 2035, on average, advanced economies must slash energy emissions 80% and the emerging markets 65%. The G20 is responsible for 80% of total emissions. They must lead the charge, keeping with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in the light of different national circumstances. But these must be done with a joint effort, pooling resources, scientific capacities, and proven and affordable technologies for all to be able to reach those targets. I'm honored to be working closely with President Lula of Brazil, with both G20 chair and COP30 host, to secure maximum ambition, acceleration, and cooperation. We just met for that purpose. Finance is essential. COP29 is around the corner. It must deliver a significant new finance goal. And we also need a loss and damage fund that meets the scale of the challenge and developed countries meeting their adaptation finance promises. And we must finally flip the script on a crazy situation. We continue to reward polluters to wreck our planet. The fossil fuel industry continues to pocket massive profits and subsidies, while everyday people bear the costs of climate catastrophe, from rising insurance premiums to lost livelihoods. I call on G20 countries to shift money from fossil fuel subsidies and investments to a just energy transition, to put an effective price on carbon, and to implement new and innovative sources of financing, including solidarity levies on fossil fuel extraction through legally binding, transparent mechanisms. All by next year, and this taking into account that those who shoulder the blame must foot the bill. Polluters must pay. Excellencies, the rapid rise of new technologies poses another unpredictable existential risk. Artificial intelligence will change virtually everything we know, from work, education, and communication to culture and politics. We know AI is rapidly advancing, but where is it taking us? To more freedom or more conflict? To a more sustainable world or greater inequality? To being better informed or easier to manipulate? A handful of companies and even individuals have already amassed enormous power over the development of AI with little accountability or oversight for the moment. Without a global approach to its management, artificial intelligence could lead to artificial divisions across the board. A great fracture with two internets, two markets, two economies, with every country forced to pick a side and enormous consequences for all. The United Nations is the universal platform for dialogue and consensus. It is uniquely placed to promote cooperation on AI based on the values of the Charter and international law. The global debate happens here, or it does not happen. And I welcome important first steps. 2 resolutions in the General Assembly, the Global Digital Compact, and the recommendations of the high-level body on AI can lay the foundations for inclusive governance of AI. Let's move forward together to make AI a force for good. Excellencies, nothing lasts forever, but the feature of human life is that it appears otherwise. The current order always feels fixed until it is not. Across human history, we see empires rising and falling, old certainties crumbling, tectonic shifts in global affairs. Today, our course is unsustainable. It is in all our interests to manage the epic transformations underway, to choose the future we want, and to guide our world towards it. Many have said that the divisions and differences today are just too great, that it is impossible for us to come together for the common good. You proved that is not true. The Summit of the Future showed that with a spirit of dialogue and compromise, we can join forces to bring our world to a more sustainable path. It is not the end. It is the start of a journey. a compass in the whirlwind. Let's keep going. Let's move our world towards less impunity and more accountability, less inequality and more justice, less uncertainty and more opportunity. The people of the world are looking to us, and succeeding generations will look back on us. Let them find us on the side of the United Nations Charter, on the side of our shared values and principles, and on the right side of history. And I thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. The Assembly will now turn to agenda item 8, entitled General Debate. Excellencies, heads of state and government, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I extend a heartfelt welcome to the delegations from member states, observers, and esteemed guests. It is my profound honor and privilege to welcome you to this august hall for the general debate of the 79th session of the General Assembly. Before I proceed, I would like to recognize the presence here today of 9 of my predecessors, past presidents of the General Assembly. Although barely 2 weeks in the job, I can already appreciate the challenges they navigated through. The general debate remains one of the world's most inclusive, representative, and authoritative platforms for global reflection and collective action. This year, the urgency of our task cannot be overstated. We are falling behind in our pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals. I am informed that with just 5 years to go, less than 18% of the goals have been achieved. Also, the climate crisis is no longer a distant threat. It is here now, ravaging ecosystems and dismantling the livelihoods of entire communities. Conflicts rage from the Middle East to Ukraine, from Haiti to South Sudan, leaving in their wake death, destruction, and immense suffering. I call for an immediate ceasefire in all these conflict settings. For almost a year now, the people of Gaza and Israel have been caught in a spiraling cycle of conflict and retribution. I take this opportunity to call for an immediate ceasefire for the Hamas-Israel war, the unconditional release of hostages, and for all parties to abide by international law, including international humanitarian law, and work towards a just and lasting solution grounded in the United Nations Charter, relevant resolutions, and international law ensuring dignity for both Palestinians and Israelis. Indeed, only a two-state solution can end the cycle of violence and instability, ensuring peace, security, and dignity for both Palestinians and Israelis. Excellencies, we should be coming together for peace and the well-being of our citizens. We should not divert essential resources into military stockpiles, fueling an arms race never before seen since the Cold War era. Nuclear weapons continue to be a threat to humanity and to our planet. A nuclear war must never be fought. Conditions for their use or accidental explosion must always be avoided. We call for urgent measures for the abolition of these tools of the annihilation of the human race and our environment. Old hatreds rooted in prejudice and ignorance persist, and new divisions arise where none should exist. In the recent past, mistrust among states has grown steadily, complicating prospects for peaceful settlement of interstate disputes. It is time to invest more in building trust and practicing dialogue. Constant dialogue is a powerful weapon for all governments have in their hands. Trust and dialogue are integral parts of our human dignity and precondition for lasting peace and security. Excellencies, gender equality remains a distant goal as many women and girls around the world continue to be denied their basic rights, justice, and opportunities. Globally, we witness a troubling regression in the protection of human rights and human dignity. Millions remain trapped in poverty, their lives restricted by forces beyond their control. Forced labor and modern slavery, extending even to young boys and girls of school age, are an insult to human dignity. They must be combated in every society at all times. Excellencies, there is an urgent need to reform the international financial system as too many countries remain burdened by crippling debt, forced to choose between servicing loans and improving the lives of their citizens. Meanwhile, the digital divide continues to widen, cutting off entire populations from the tools needed to succeed in the 21st century. Excellencies, we are not mere spectators of these crises, nor are we powerless to act. Within this hall are the leaders and representatives of the world's nations, the very people with the authority and responsibility to shape the course of our shared future. At our disposal is one of the most powerful tools for positive change: international cooperation grounded in the undeniable truth that even the most powerful nation cannot solve these complex borderless challenges alone. This truth was reaffirmed through our efforts at the Summit of the Future and the consensus adoption of the Pact of the Future. The Pact of the Future charts a path forward, reinvigorating our multilateral institutions with renewed energy, focus, and clarity to meet the demands of a rapidly changing world. Let us build on this momentum. Excellencies, a better world begins with unlocking the potential of we, the peoples of the world. Freedom and good governance ensure that no one, no individual, no community is left behind. In this endeavor, we must never overlook the challenges faced by the small island developing states, the landlocked developing states, the least developing countries, and the small states. It is incumbent on the United Nations to do more than just express solidarity. Specific programs responding to the unique situations in which these groups of states find themselves must be envisaged. This will be a priority of my presidency. Africa is one of the priorities of the United Nations. We must support Africa. The African Union's Agenda 2063 presents a bold and transformative vision for the continent. Africa currently has the youngest population in the world, and by 2063, 1 in 4 people will be African. The generation of resources for the well-being of these peoples has been much slower than the population growth. We must not let Africa's potential go unrealized. In fact, to truly unlock Africa's vast potential, we must actively cultivate global partnerships that align with the continent's aspirations and drive its success. In this endeavor, I look forward to working with member states of the United Nations this year on keeping Africa at the heart of our agenda. Excellencies, in this 79th session, I also want to prioritize multilingualism as a recognition of our world's cultural and linguistic richness. We understand that the multitude of languages, cultures, and perspectives should not be viewed as a source of division, but as a wellspring of strength. Excellencies, we anticipate a very successful high-level week. In addition to the recently concluded Summit of the Future and this ongoing general debate, several critical high-level events are expected to take place. These include the high-level event on microbial resistance, the high-level meeting on addressing the existential threats posed by sea level rise, and the high-level plenary meeting to commemorate and promote the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. Throughout the 79th session, we will address the urgent issues of our time. While we may not agree on every issue, we all share the same fundamental goal: to build a better world for everyone, everywhere. Here today are representatives from 193 member states, each embodying our collective aspirations, each guided by a shared vision. The path ahead is difficult, fraught with obstacles that may at times seem insurmountable, but they are not impassable. We have the tools, the knowledge, and the collective will to overcome these challenges if we act together with courage and conviction. Thank you. Before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind members that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on the agreed basis that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes to enable all the speakers to be heard at a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace so that interpretation into other official United Nations languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the General Assembly at previous sessions, namely, that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the General Assembly Hall after a speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. After delivering their statements from the rostrum, speakers are invited to exit the General Assembly Hall through room GA 200, located behind the podium, before returning to their seats. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees to proceed in this manner? It is so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of members that during the general debate, official photographs of all the speakers are taken by the Department of Global Communications. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Muito bem. Meus cumprimentos ao presidente da Assembleia Geral, Filemon Yang, e também quero saudar o secretário-geral, Antônio Guterres, e cada um dos chefes de Estado e de governo e delegados e delegadas aqui presentes. Dirijo-me, em particular, à delegação palestina, que integra pela primeira vez essa sessão de abertura, mesmo saindo na condição de membro observador. Senhoras e senhores, adotamos ontem, aqui neste mesmo plenário, o Pacto para o Futuro. Sua difícil aprovação demonstra o enfraquecimento de nossa capacidade coletiva de negociação e de diálogo. Seu alcance limitado também é a expressão do paradoxo do nosso tempo. Andamos em círculos entre compromissos possíveis que levam a resultados insuficientes. Nem mesmo com a tragédia da Covid-19 fomos capazes de nos unir em torno de um tratado sobre pandemias na Organização Mundial da Saúde. Precisamos ir muito além e dotar a ONU dos meios necessários para enfrentar as mudanças vertiginosas do panorama internacional. Vivemos momentos de crescentes angústias, frustrações, tensões e medo. Testemunhamos a alarmante escalada de disputas geopolíticas e de rivalidades estratégicas. 2023 ostenta o triste recorde do maior número de conflitos desde a Segunda Guerra Mundial. Os gastos militares globais cresceram pelo 9º ano consecutivo e atingiram 2 trilhões e 400 bilhões de dólares. Mais de 90 bilhões de dólares foram mobilizados com arsenais nucleares. Esses recursos poderiam ter sido utilizados para combater a fome e enfrentar a mudança do clima. O que se vê é o aumento das capacidades bélicas. O uso da força, sem amparo no direito internacional, está se tornando a regra. Presenciamos 2 conflitos simultâneos com potencial de se tornar confrontos generalizados. Na Ucrânia, é com pesar que vemos a guerra se estender sem perspectiva de paz. O Brasil condenou de maneira firme a invasão do território ucraniano. Já está claro que nenhuma das partes conseguirá atingir todos os seus objetivos pela via militar. O recurso a armamento cada vez mais destrutivos traz à memória os tempos mais sombrios do confronto estéril da Guerra Fria. Criar condições para a retomada do diálogo direto entre as partes é crucial neste momento. Esta é a mensagem do entendimento de 6 pontos que China e Brasil oferecem para que se instale um processo de diálogo e o fim das hostilidades. Em Gaza e na Cisjordânia, assistimos a uma das maiores crises humanitárias da história recente e que agora se expande perigosamente para o Líbano. O que começou com uma ação terrorista de fanáticos contra civis israelenses inocentes tornou-se uma punição coletiva de todo o povo palestino. São mais de 40 mil vítimas fatais, em sua maioria mulheres e crianças. O direito de defesa transformou-se no direito de vingança, que impede um acordo para a liberação de reféns e adia o cessar-fogo. Conflitos esquecidos no Sudão e no Iêmen impõem sofrimento atroz a quase 30 milhões de pessoas. Este ano, o número dos que necessitam de ajuda humanitária no mundo chegará a 300 milhões de pessoas. Em tempos de crescente polarização, expressões como desglobalização se tornaram corriqueiras. Mas é impossível desplanetizar nossa vida em comum. Estamos condenados à interdependência da mudança climática. O planeta já não espera para cobrar da próxima geração e está farto de acordos climáticos que não são cumpridos. Está cansado de metas de redução de emissão de carbono negligenciadas do auxílio financeiro aos países pobres que nunca chega. O negacionismo sucumbe ante as evidências do aquecimento global. 2024 caminha para ser o ano mais quente da história moderna. Furacões no Caribe, tufões na Ásia, seca e inundações na África e chuvas torrenciais na Europa deixam um rastro de morte e de destruição. No sul do Brasil, tivemos a maior enchente desde 1941. A Amazônia está atravessando a pior estiagem em 45 anos. Incêndios florestais se alastraram pelo país e já devoraram 5 milhões de hectares apenas no mês de agosto. O meu governo não terceiriza a responsabilidade e nem abdica da sua soberania. Já fizemos muito, mas sabemos que é preciso fazer muito mais. Além de enfrentar os desafios da crise climática, lutamos contra quem lucra com a degradação ambiental. Não transigiremos com litígios ambientais, com o garimpo ilegal e com o crime organizado. Reduzimos o desmatamento na Amazônia em 50% no último ano e vamos erradicá-lo até 2030. Não é mais admissível pensar em soluções para as florestas tropicais sem ouvir os povos indígenas, comunidades tradicionais e todos aqueles que vivem nelas. Nossa visão de desenvolvimento sustentável está alicerçada no potencial da bioeconomia. O Brasil sediará a COP30 em 2025, convicto de que o multilateralismo é o único caminho para superar a urgência climática. Nossa contribuição nacionalmente determinada, o NDC, será apresentada ainda este ano, em linha com o objetivo de limitar o aumento da temperatura do planeta a 1,5 graus. O Brasil desponta como celeiro de oportunidade neste mundo revolucionado pela transição energética. Somos hoje um dos países com a matriz energética mais limpa do mundo. 90% da nossa eletricidade provém de fontes renováveis, como a biomassa, a hidrelétrica, a solar e a eólica. Fizemos opção pelos biocombustíveis há 50 anos, muito antes que a discussão sobre energias alternativas ganhasse tração. Estamos na vanguarda em outros nichos importantes, como o da produção do hidrogênio verde. É hora de enfrentar o debate sobre o ritmo lento da descarbonização do planeta e trabalhar por uma economia menos dependente de combustíveis fósseis. Senhor presidente, na América Latina vive-se desde 2014 uma segunda década perdida. O crescimento médio da região nesse período foi de apenas 0,9%, metade do verificado na década perdida de 1980. Essa combinação de baixo crescimento e altos níveis de desigualdade resulta em efeitos nefastos sobre a paisagem política. Tragada por disputas muitas vezes alheias à região, nossa vocação de cooperação e entendimento se fragiliza. É injustificado manter Cuba em uma lista unilateral de estados que supostamente promovem terrorismo e impor medidas coercitivas unilaterais que penalizam indevidamente as populações mais vulneráveis. No Haiti, é inadiável conjugar ações para restaurar a ordem pública e promover o desenvolvimento. No Brasil, a defesa da democracia implica ação permanente ante investidas extremistas, messiânicas e totalitárias que espalham o ódio, a intolerância e o ressentimento. Brasileiras e brasileiros continuarão a derrotar os que tentam solapar as instituições e colocá-las a serviço de interesses reacionários. A democracia precisa responder às legítimas aspirações dos que não aceitam mais a fome, a desigualdade, o desemprego e a violência. No mundo globalizado, não faz sentido recorrer a falsos patriotas e isolacionistas. Tampouco a esperança no recurso a experiências ultraliberais que apenas agravam as dificuldades de um continente depauperado. O futuro de nossa região passa, sobretudo, por construir um Estado sustentável, eficiente, inclusivo e que enfrente todas as formas de discriminação, que não se intimida ante indivíduos, corporação ou plataformas digitais que se julgam acima da lei. A liberdade é a primeira vítima de um mundo sem regras. Elementos essenciais da soberania incluem o direito de legislar, julgar disputas e fazer cumprir as regras dentro de seu território, incluindo o ambiente digital. O Estado que estamos construindo é sensível às necessidades dos mais vulneráveis, sem abdicar de fundamentos macroeconômicos sadios. A falsa oposição entre o Estado e mercado foi abandonada pelas nações desenvolvidas que voltaram a praticar políticas industriais ativas e forte regulação da economia doméstica. Na área da inteligência artificial, vivenciamos a consolidação de assimetrias que levam a um verdadeiro oligopólio do saber. Avançam a concentração sem precedentes na mão de pequeno número de pessoas e de empresas sediadas em um número ainda menor de países. Interessa-nos uma inteligência artificial emancipadora, que também tem a cara do sul global e que fortaleça a diversidade cultural, que respeite os direitos humanos, proteja dados pessoais e promova a integridade da informação. E, sobretudo, que seja ferramenta para a paz, não para a guerra. Necessitamos de uma governança intergovernamental da inteligência artificial, em que todos os estados tenham assento. Senhor presidente, as condições para acesso a recursos financeiros seguem proibitivas para a maioria dos países de renda baixa e média. O fardo da dívida limita o espaço fiscal para investir em saúde, educação, reduzir as desigualdades e enfrentar a mudança do clima. Países da África tomam empréstimo a taxas até 8 vezes maiores que a Alemanha e 4 vezes maior do que os Estados Unidos. É um plano Marshall às avessas, em que os mais pobres financiam os mais ricos. Sem maior participação dos países em desenvolvimento na direção do FMI e do Banco Mundial, não haverá mudança efetiva. Enquanto os objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável ficam para trás, as 150 maiores empresas do mundo obtiveram juntas um lucro de 1 trilhão e 800 bilhões de dólares nos últimos 2 anos. A fortuna dos 5 principais bilionários mais que dobrou desde o início dessa década, ao passo que 60% da humanidade ficou mais pobre. Os super ricos pagam proporcionalmente muito menos impostos do que a classe trabalhadora. Para corrigir essa anomalia, o Brasil tem insistido na cooperação internacional para desenvolver padrões mínimos de tributação global. Os dados divulgados há 2 meses pela FAO sobre o estado da insegurança alimentar no mundo são estarrecedores. O número de pessoas passando fome ao redor do planeta aumentou em mais de 152 milhões desde 2019. Isso significa que 9% da população mundial, 733 milhões de pessoas, estão subnutridas. O problema é especialmente grave na África e na Ásia, mas ele também persiste em partes da América Latina. Mulheres e meninas são as vítimas maiores de pessoas em situação de fome no mundo. Pandemias, conflitos armados, eventos climáticos de subsídios agrícolas dos países ricos ampliam o alcance deste flagelo. Mas a fome não é resultado apenas de fatores externos. Ela decorre, sobretudo, de escolhas políticas. Hoje, o mundo produz alimento mais do que suficiente para erradicá-la. O que falta é criar condições de acesso aos alimentos. Esse é o compromisso mais urgente do meu governo. Acabar com a fome no Brasil, como fizemos em 2014. Só em 2023, retiramos 24 milhões e 400 mil pessoas da condição de insegurança alimentar severa. A Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza, que lançaremos no Rio de Janeiro, em novembro, nasce dessa vontade política e desse espírito de solidariedade. Ela será um dos principais resultados da presidência brasileira do G20 e está aberta a todos os países do mundo. Todos os que queiram se somar a esse esforço coletivo serão muito bem-vindos. Senhor presidente, senhoras e senhores, prestes a completar 80 anos, a Carta das Nações Unidas nunca passou por uma reforma abrangente. Apenas 4 emendas foram aprovadas, todas elas entre 1965 e 1973. A versão atual da Carta não trata de alguns dos desafios mais prementes da humanidade. Na fundação da ONU, éramos 51 países. Hoje, somos 193. Várias nações, principalmente no continente africano, estavam sob domínio colonial e não tiveram voz sobre seus objetivos e funcionamento. Inexiste equilíbrio de gênero no exercício das mais altas funções. O cargo de secretário-geral jamais foi ocupado por uma mulher. Estamos chegando ao final do primeiro quarto do século XXI, com as Nações Unidas cada vez mais esvaziada e paralisada. É hora de reagir com vigor a essa situação, restituindo à organização as prerrogativas que decorrem da sua condição de Fórum Universal. Não bastam ajustes pontuais. Precisamos contemplar uma ampla revisão da Carta. Sua reforma deve compreender os seguintes objetivos: a transformação do Conselho Econômico e Social no principal fórum para o tratamento do desenvolvimento sustentável e do combate à mudança climática, com capacidade real de inspirar as instituições financeiras. A revitalização do papel da Assembleia Geral, inclusive em temas de paz e segurança internacionais. O fortalecimento da Comissão de Consolidação da Paz. A reforma do Conselho de Segurança, com foco em sua composição, método de trabalho, direito de veto, de modo a torná-la mais eficaz e representativa das realidades contemporâneas. A exclusão da América Latina e da África de assentos permanentes no Conselho de Segurança é um eco inaceitável de práticas de dominação do passado colonial. Vamos promover essa discussão de forma transparente. Vamos promover essa discussão de forma transparente, em consulta no G77, no G20, nos BRICS, na CELAC, no CARICOM e tantos outros espaços que existem para discutir. Não tem ilusões sobre a complexidade de uma reforma como essa, que enfrentará interesses cristalizados de manutenção do status quo. Exigirá enorme esforço de negociação, mas essa é a nossa responsabilidade. Não podemos esperar por outra tragédia mundial, como a Segunda Grande Guerra, para só então construir sobre seus escombros uma nova governança global. A vontade da maioria pode persuadir os que cegam as expressões cruas dos mecanismos de poder. Neste plenário, ecoam as aspirações de toda a humanidade. Aqui, travamos os grandes debates do mundo. Neste fórum, buscamos as respostas para os problemas que afligem o planeta. Recai sobre a Assembleia Geral, expressão maior do multilateralismo, a missão de pavimentar o caminho para o futuro. Muito obrigado e boa sorte.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank
Nós acompanhamos ao vivo de Nova York, nos Estados Unidos, o discurso do presidente Lula na Assembleia Geral das Nações Unidas, evento que reúne líderes de 193 países. Esta é a edição número 79 da Assembleia Geral, que é um dos 6 órgãos da ONU, com cada nação tendo direito a um voto. Como é tradição desde 1947, o Brasil é o primeiro país a se pronunciar no debate geral, oportunidade para o governo brasileiro apresentar as prioridades do país, tanto internamente quanto internacionalmente. E a gente segue aqui com o professor Juliano Portinhas e vamos fazer esse primeiro comentário, né, professor, sobre o discurso do presidente Lula. O que a gente pode destacar? A gente achou interessante, inclusive, que ele pontuou propostas nesse final do discurso, né?
Foi um discurso bastante interessante. É importante termos um presidente que está relacionado com o mundo real. Na ONU, ele está falando dos problemas reais da humanidade, dos mais importantes, falou sobre guerras, falou sobre mudanças climáticas, sobre a fome e, no final, sobre a necessidade de mais legitimidade, a própria estrutura da ONU que não tem conseguido obter o nível de acordos que nós precisamos, que são acordos de cunho global para lidarmos com problemas globais. Então, ele
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States of America. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
My fellow leaders, today is the fourth time I've had the great honor of speaking to this assembly as President of the United States. It'll be my last. I've seen a remarkable sweep of history. I was first elected to office in the United States of America as a U.S. Senator in 1972. Now, I know I look like I'm only 40. I know that. I was 29 years old. Back then, we were living through an inflection point, a moment of tension and uncertainty. The world was divided by the Cold War. The Middle East was headed toward war. America was at war in Vietnam. At that point, the longest war in America's history. Our country was divided and angry, and there were questions about our staying power and our future. But even then, I entered public life not out of despair, but out of optimism. The United States and the world got through that moment. It wasn't easy or simple without significant setbacks. But we go on to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons through arms control, and then go on to bring the Cold War itself to an end. Israel and Egypt went to war, but then forged a historic peace. We ended the war in Vietnam. The last year in Hanoi, I met with the Vietnamese leadership. We elevated our partnership to the highest level. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for reconciliation. That today, the United States and Vietnam are partners and friends. And it's proof that even from the horrors of war, there's a way forward. Things can get better. We should never forget that. I've seen that throughout my career. In the 1980s, I spoke out against apartheid in South Africa. And then I watched the racist regime fall. In the 1990s, I worked to hold Milosevic accountable for war crimes. He was held accountable. At home, I wrote and passed the Violence Against Women Act to end the scourge of violence against women and girls, not only in America, but across the world, as many of you have as well. But we have so much more to do, especially against rape and sexual violence as weapons of war and terror. We were attacked on 9/11 by Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We brought him justice. Then I came to the presidency at another moment of crisis and uncertainty. I believed America had to look forward. New challenges, new threats, new opportunities were in front of us. We needed to put ourselves in a position to see the threats, to deal with the challenges, and to seize the opportunities as well. We need to end the era of war that began on 9/11. As Vice President to President Obama, He asked me to work to wind down the military operations in Iraq, and we did, painful as it was. When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th. It was a decision accompanied by tragedy.